This morning, the tax ban cometh, a week from Monday. There are many changes in the new tax code. A tax expert will unravel some of the confusion and offer tips that just may save you some money. Plus, we'll be one-on-one with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. He's outraged over plans to build a jail in his backyard. Also, he reveals plans for a summer camp named in memory of murdered teen Junior Guzman-Feliz.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Since Ruben Diaz Jr. took over as borough president of the Bronx 10 years ago, the Bronx has undergone somewhat of a renaissance. There's been a resurgence of new housing to replace years of blight, an influx of new businesses, and there has been an upsurge in employment. With a population of 1.5 million people, Ruben Diaz is at the helm of a borough which is the size of some small cities. And it's good to have you back on Pix 11.
It's good to be back, Marvin.
You know, every accomplishment that you've had the past 10 years is always met by a new challenge, and the challenge you're facing right now is something the mayor wants to do. He wants to put a small jail in every borough, including yours, but
well, let me be clear. I am for the closure of Rikers Island. We know that Rikers is a stain in the soul of the city of New York. And so I've been part of the initiative, part of the campaign to close it down. With that said, we have to have jails in the boroughs. What I'm concerned, and since day one, and what I've been outraged about, is that the city of New York never consulted those of us in the Bronx when they chose the location of the tow pound in Mott Haven. So we're outraged for 3 different reasons, Marvin. Number one, it's a bad location. Number 2, we have a better location, but we were never consulted. And number 3, the fact that they're putting all 4 sites all over the city of New York under one ULURP, which is the process for the dispensation of city property, sets a bad precedence, and different communities all over the city of New York are being put against each other, and we should have one ULURP process per every site.
Now, the original plan called for these satellite prisons to be located next to the criminal court, but the one that he's talking about in Mott Haven, I believe, is about 2 miles from your courthouse.
It's 2 miles, so it really doesn't check off the boxes that the experts would tell you. So every expert, not only in New York City and the advocates nationwide as well, they'll say that the best model when you're dealing with criminal justice reform and jailing and those that are detained is to have the jails next to the courthouse. This way, family members can have better access to their loved ones, and you can have defense attorneys have better access to their clients so they could be better prepared. But also in the site that they chose, not only is it 2 miles, like you said, away from the courthouse, but there's been a plan by the people of Diego Beekman houses who for so many years and decades have bettered the neighborhood. Not only have they bettered the neighborhood, which is not perfect, but they've also have this plan to develop housing, to develop jobs, to create recreational facilities and amenities for the neighboring communities for that location that we all supported. To tell those folks now that all of their years of hard work, that we're just going to discount that, to me, that doesn't sound like we're the fairest big city in the United States.
Now, you have an alternative site, some property which is owned by the state, don't you?
So what we're saying is treat us like the other boroughs and have our jail adjacent to the courthouse. Initially, they only looked at the parcel of land at the courthouse that the city owns. Because they want to be politically expedient, and they did not take into consideration the family court building that's only being half used, and they didn't take into account the piece of property that's also adjacent to that property that's owned by the state of New York. If you take all 3 properties there, I think that we can have an adequate jailing site, one that can accommodate all of the needs as we move forward. But again, the city of New York, they didn't come to us when they chose the initial site. They chose expediency over the hard work that the people of Diego Beekman and others in the neighborhood have done on the tow pound, and they certainly didn't come to us with a viable plan because they didn't want to deal, in my opinion, with the state to begin with next to the courthouse.
Now, you brought that alternative plan to the attention of the state, and if I understand correctly, you've already got tacit approval from them?
I've spoke to the governor personally. The governor said, you know, the thing is, Marvin, you know that the mayor and the governor, they at odds, you know, quite often.
I've noticed.
So I think that what happened here is that the mayor, in a dictatorial way, what he did is that he chose the site that the city owned and didn't really want to deal with the state. But I spoke to the governor. The governor also is in favor of closing down Rikers Island. He says if the state has to give that property over, they certainly will in order to make sure that we can close Rikers as quickly as possible.
Now, there's still a lot of room to talk because this is a project that's supposed to take over 10 years from 2021 to 2027, I believe. But I can't believe that as the borough president, you don't have more of a role than just an advisory role in this.
Well, look, when you look at the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, which is the ULURP process, this is what the city uses to dispense their property, dispensation of their property. Yeah, the Borough President's Community Board's advisory role. What we are looking now is to create an energy so that the City Council ultimately says we don't want to set this bad precedence of having one ULURP. So again, every one of the 4 jails all over in every borough, the Bronx, we have our own concerns. Queens has their own concerns. That's why we've been joined by the folks at Kew Gardens and Chinatown. Everyone has their own concerns, and those concerns should be allowed to be put on the table. With one ULURP, they're not doing that, setting a bad precedent.
Okay, so here we're talking about a place to put the bad guys. But you were asking for reform, criminal justice reform of the legislature, which was just passed last weekend. You call it common sense criminal justice reform. What changes are included in this?
I would hope that you refrain from saying a place to put the bad guys because we're not talking about prisons. We're speaking of jails. And what we've seen is traditionally a criminal justice system that has had individuals who have been accused and there have been allegations, but they have not been convicted, stay in for too long. Look what happened to Khalif Browder, a young man who was arrested because he was accused of stealing a backpack. Those charges were eventually dropped, but only after he did 3 years on Rikers Island because his family could not afford a cash bail. So I'm so happy that, and I commend the legislature for last weekend passing cash bail reform, discovery reform, so that defense could also have information that the prosecutors have. They have speedy trial now, and alternatives like the shock program, so that folks can get that discipline and be able to get out earlier than what they were normally, the time that they were given. All of these things, I think, go a long way in reducing the amount of population in the jail system, but also creating a criminal justice system that's fair.
I want to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the initiative you have launched, a summer camp for kids in the Bronx in memory of Junior. Okay. We'll be right back. Back now with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., and we're talking about the Bronx, the only place called the Bronx, not the Bronx, right? After talking about one of the most heinous crimes last year was that tragic murder of 15-year-old Junior Guzman-Feliz by gangs. And you are doing something now. You're launching an initiative for those kids on the streets, to get them off the street in the summer, and give them an opportunity to get off into the country by launching a summer camp. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so let me just say that last year was the 6th consecutive year that the Bronx has saw less than 100 homicides. That's unprecedented. But with that said, we're not perfect, Marvin. And we still have pockets in the Bronx where we see a lot of violent crimes. Last year, the world saw, because of the video, it was videotaped, the most heinous crime than anybody, which is the brutal stabbing and killing of a young man by a savage gang. And we need to answer the call. So many people were affected by this. We continue to support the family. We've done things like name the street after Lesandro Jr. Guzman, so we never forget what happens on that horrific corner. But we also work with the parents and with the state. We were able to get the governor to donate 47 acres of land at Harriman State Park, which is only 35 minutes north of the city. And working with the state and the Fresh Air Fund, what we're saying is in these pockets in the Bronx, how is it that we could do something different in the summer months to avoid this from happening again? We created Camp Junior. Camp Junior is for boys and girls of ages 9 through 13, where they go and they do a sleepaway. And we're doing it 2-week intervals, 4 sessions. And we want to start this summer. We were able to allocate millions of dollars to rehab the cabins and the grounds. We were able to get the assembly to allocate money in the later years.
$2 million.
In the later years, well, the governor did $2 million in capital. I did $1 million in capital. The assembly is doing operating expenses, but we want those individuals who contacted our office, who want to be there and supportive of the family, to continue to donate. And what we have is an online donation where you can go to www.crowdrise.com/Camp Junior, or you can call the Fresh Air Fund if you want. If you're from the Bronx and you want your children from ages 9 through 13 to be able to benefit from the camp, or if you have older teenagers who can be the counselors and get paid for being counselors during the entire duration of the 8 weeks in the summer months. We know that in the summer months, that's where crime spikes, and we want to give our children exposure to recreational activities, the camp life, but also with an anti-violence component and curriculum that the family wanted to be added in, at this camp.
A very positive initiative. Let me give that again, that location. Let's put that up on the screen. It's crowdrise.com/Camp Junior.
And this is for operating expenses. No donation is too small or too big.
Okay, very good. And if you want more information, you can always contact the
Fresh Air and the Fresh Air Fund as well.
Fresh Air Fund and the Borough President's Office.
Correct.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about something in your State of the Borough address in February. You talked about challenges. You talked about cleaning up public housing. We've certainly had enough problems in public housing at NYCHA. 400,000 residents, and you have a good share of them in the Bronx. What are you doing? Right now we have a federal monitor in. Do you feel that the federal government should take over the failures that have existed in public housing?
Well, that was settled already, and I didn't believe that the federal government should take over. What I was hoping for is that they reach some agreement, which they did, between the federal government and the city, and you have an independent monitor. The problem is that the city of New York has still, once again, shown its ineptitude. When you look at the New York City Housing Authority, and I was born in New York City housing, so this is personal to me, and I have family members who live in New York City housing. And of course, as a borough president, we represent so many of public housing in our borough and throughout the city of New York. To have New Yorkers live with such deplorable conditions, where you have no heat, no hot water, where you have garbage all over the place, and yet even when there is money that is allocated, the city of New York just manages to continue to fumble. This is the most egregious example of government ineptitude.
Do you hold the mayor accountable for
Absolutely.
this?
The mayor's accountable. The leadership in NYCHA is accountable. And there is no reason why, again, if the mayor's going around the country saying that he wants to be president of the United States because he represents America's fairest city, there is no reason for New Yorkers to be living in such conditions, whether you live in public housing or whether you live in a luxury apartment. Here in the city of New York, in this day and age, we all have the right to hot water, to heat, to have our garbage cleaned up. And what we're saying is a number of things should happen. The city, the state, and the federal government need to put their money where their mouth is so that we can continue to create better living conditions. But we also need to make sure that the money is being spent right. The city of New York, for instance, at Patterson Houses in the South Bronx, for the last 7-8 years, they've had fully funded boilers, Marvin, that still have not been purchased because the city doesn't have the capacity, or they are just totally inept and don't know what to do with the money when they get it.
Let's shift gears again real quickly, talk about the city's specialized schools. 2 of the 9 specialized schools in the city are located right in the Bronx, and the mayor wants more diversity. He wants to change the testing standards to allow more diversity in the schools. And your take on that?
So I agree with the mayor there. When you have a system in the public school system where you have 4,800 students that were admitted to the specialized high schools, but about 11% of those are Black and Latino students. I mean, what are we saying here? This is an indictment on the city of New York. This is an indictment on our system. Is it that Black and Latino students aren't as smart as Asian and white students in the city of New York? I beg to differ. I don't subscribe to that notion. What we're saying is, and I've been on this since 2011, doing reports, what we're saying is that we have to have a pipeline like we used to have in gifted and talented classes. We should have perhaps testing plus, not only gauge people's accelerated learners, but other talents. And we can do this in a way, Marvin, where we don't have to put the Asian community against the Black and Latino community. We can just raise the amount of specialized high school seats.
Okay, the question I've got how many times have you been on this program?
A number of times.
I never let you leave.
I love being with you.
So I want to know, are you ready right now to announce your candidacy for mayor?
I'm ready right now to say that I continue to explore and I'm continue to speak to New Yorkers. Look, I love this city. The city has afforded me a whole lot of opportunities to create jobs in the Bronx, to create housing. And I believe that New Yorkers are looking for that level of leadership that's a pragmatic, progressive, moving forward to bring people together. We have shown to do that in the Bronx, and stay tuned. Let's see if we can do the same for that throughout the city of New York.
I've covered politics, and that sounds like the opening salvo to me.
I'll come back, though, again, Marvin. Thank you.
You'll announce on this program. Ruben.
Always
Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz.
Thank
you. Always a pleasure to have you on the program. We're going to take a break, and if you're still doing your taxes this weekend, you don't want to leave right now because we got some very important advice coming right up. Stay with us. I'm sure many of you are busy this weekend preparing your tax returns to meet the filing deadline 1 week from tomorrow. Poet T.S. Eliot wrote, "April is the cruelest month," and if you're in the process of filing your return in the year of new rules, you certainly can feel that way. Adjusting to the new Form 1040 and the numerous changes under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, well, has made this a very challenging tax season. To help clear up some of the questions, I'm pleased to be joined now by E. Martin Davidoff. He's a lawyer, a CPA, an expert, a tax attorney. He's a partner in the firm of Prager Metis, with offices around the world. His office is located in Cranberry, New Jersey. So good to have you with us. Let's get right to it.
Glad to be here.
What are the changes, Martin? What are the changes for filing personal income taxes?
Well, you're losing lots of itemized deductions. You are limited to $10,000 for state and local taxes. You can no longer deduct miscellaneous itemized deductions. On the other hand, they've doubled the standard deduction, but they've eliminated exemptions, personal exemptions. They've increased the child credit from $1,000 to $2,000. Lots and lots of changes. And a big thing for small businesses is you get a 20% deduction for qualified business income under what is called 199A.
Now, okay, you gave us some of them, but tick off some of the others, the deductions you can and cannot take.
You can take medical deductions. You can still take charitable contributions. You can take home mortgage interest on your principal home mortgage, but you can't take a home equity loan interest. You can no longer take miscellaneous itemized deductions for job hunting, tax advice, and the like. You can no longer take casualty losses. You can no longer take moving expenses.
I hope everyone's taking notes. Okay, yeah, I am. All right, even though filers may not be able to itemize their deductions on the federal return, New York State allows you to do that.
Yes, many states have not decoupled, and in fact, New York State has like a 25-page form. I think it's an IT 196 that you can look up and work through the worksheets. But if you think you don't have to itemize for federal purposes, you still can itemize for New York State. Many people, so as long as you don't take the standard deduction, which is $16,050 for joint returns and $8,000 for single.
That's why we need guys like you. Okay,
yeah. It's very complicated.
What are the most frequently omitted deductions that were allowed people fail to do?
Well, in small businesses, people are not necessarily taking all the deductions for 179. People don't necessarily keep good records about their deductions, and they're missing that. And you just have to really go through the forms and be very detailed about your approach. The biggest problem with small business, for example, is record keeping, and they don't keep proper records and they miss deductions.
Count me in on that. Okay. Why are people this year going to get smaller refunds? Well,
there are going to be winners and losers. Some are going to get smaller refunds because they are just the law impacted them. But more people are going to get smaller refunds because when they pass a law, the withholding tables withheld too little money. So some people are going to owe, but many people are getting fewer refunds. That's what we're finding out there in the field.
What if you can't pay it? What if you can't pay your taxes this year? You just don't have the money.
Well, if you can't pay it, first of all, keep current first. Make sure your withholding for 19 is correct. Make sure you're paying quarterly estimates if you're required to pay quarterly estimates. File even if you can't pay, because if you don't file, you're going to be subject to a 5% per month penalty if you don't get an extension, you don't file. And an extension is only a time to file, an extension of time to file, not a time to pay. But if you can't pay, my recommendation is file on time and get into an installment agreement with the Internal Revenue Service. There's lots of alternatives.
What about paying estimated taxes? Is that something that's mandatory?
It's mandatory if you owe more than $1,000 in any given year. That's not withholding. So if you're going to owe money and you're going to owe an extra $3,000 or $4,000 each year, you're required to pay $750 to $1,000 of estimated taxes on April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and January 15th.
What's the so-called kiddie tax?
The kiddie tax is a tax that used to be on the parents' tax rates that kids had on unearned income. So if you had wealthy kids who had portfolios, they've changed that because it's very complicated to integrate with the parents. They're now taxed at the higher trust rates and not the parents' rates.
Now, mortgage payments, tuition, we used to be able to deduct that. Can we still do that?
Well, that's a very interesting. Mortgage interest you can deduct on your primary mortgage that you use to acquire your house, but not your home equity loans. And very interesting, they're still debating which laws to pass for 18. There's currently a bill in Congress to allow certain extenders like the tuition deduction and mortgage interest, the insurance, the premium insurance. That's still pending in Congress. So if you have one of those deductions, you might want to look it up and put your return on extension, because they may pass the law after April 15th. It's March 12th. They had hearings on this.
So it's still a program in progress.
It's still a program in progress, which is crazy. Now, there is still the tuition credit, but some people qualified for the deduction, not the credit. So you have to watch the new legislation, and you may want to put your return on extension, or if you need the money now, file your return, but keep an eye and amend your return later.
Now, also under this new reform tax bill, there are a lot of new rules to consider if you own a business in the tri-state area.
Absolutely, and the biggest one is the qualified business income deduction. Qualified business income deduction allows you a deduction of 20% of your business from a trade or business. And the first thing is, what's a trade or business? Possibly your real estate, your two bedroom real estate or house real estate may not qualify. But real trade, plumbers and doctors and everybody, if they're under $315,000 for a joint return, under $157,500 for single or head of household, you get to deduct 20% of your business income. Above that, there are special rules which restrict which professions, like certain law, medicine, they're not allowed if they're over some numbers. There's lots of phase-ins. There's 248 pages of regulations on this.
And you read every one of them.
Just on qualified business income. And it's very, very complicated.
How can owners of small business reduce their risk of being audited?
Small businesses, it's very interesting. Sole proprietorships get audited more frequently than partnerships and S corporations, so changing your entity. And then really, it's the fear of auditing. If you keep good business records and keep your business separate from your personal, you'll be able to survive audits.
Martin, what do you see as the impact of all these tax changes?
Lots of complexity, some simplification for people who are taking higher standard deductions, and generally, that's the basic.
Now, IRA deductions. We used to be able to take a deduction for that in the past. Can we still do that?
You can still take an IRA deduction. You'll have up to April 15th to set up your IRA, and you can do a SEP deduction up until October 15th.
So take a look out there. Speak to these folks who are scratching their head right now and say, I don't know, I'm trying to add this all up. What's the basic guidance from a guy who's a tax expert, a CPA, and tell them what to do?
What should you do is you should get a tax advisor and at least get a consultation. If you can't afford somebody to prepare your returns, at least have somebody review your returns who understands the law.
Now, what if you do, all right, I'm looking here at something to note. If you do not receive a W-2, a 1099 or a K-1, which helps you in filing your return, what's wrong?
Well, you can go to your employer and ask them for one. If they don't provide one, the IRS has forms that you can use in place of that. For example, a K-1, you can use a Form 8882 to say, I didn't get my K-1, here's my estimate of what my income should be. Now,
there are some folks out there, and I'm thinking I'm not going to report my income. Okay,
well, that's a crime. That's criminal. I wouldn't want to be in that position, but not reporting income is something that you're taking a risk, just like any other criminal.
All right, having the opportunity, I know you're going to send me a bill afterwards. What final guidance would you provide to all of us? I mean, I know it's always a tough time of year when you get the Ides of April, right? April 15th is the deadline this year, and it is a very complicated tax code. Originally, they said this was going to help the middle class. Is it?
I think it is helping some of the middle class. That is correct. And the other thing I would tell you, if I was give one guidance, if you haven't filed your returns, there's $1.4 billion available for 2015 that after April 15th of 2019 won't be available. So if you haven't filed your 2015 taxes, you may have a refund coming.
Okay. Look at it. Thank you for your guidance. E. Martin Davidoff, always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I see you after the show? And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this program again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.